Hey there, welcome for another week of Bible study. Hope you got your pen and notepad ready, because today we're talking about the fall. Enjoy.
Which the all right. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, You shall not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that is that is was that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruits and ate. She also gave her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, Where are you? So he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself.
Okay, and then starting at verse 11. This is the NIV version. And he said, or starting at 11, and he said, Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man said, The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. Then the Lord God said to the woman, What is this you have done? The woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock and the wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To the woman, he said, I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam, he said, Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. You must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful and toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since it were since since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Because Adam named his wife Eve, because be, she would become the mother of all the living. Do I read 21 or stop there?
Kia has the rest.
Oh, okay.
One moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what'd you say?
I said one moment. Trying to. You said where we at? 21.
Yeah, verse 21.
Okay, I hope I'm at the right one. All right. The Lord visits Sarah. Hold on. I think this doesn't even like go along with it.
Chapter
I'm
3.
on my phone, so it might be a little different.
No, you're fine. Chapter 3, verse 21.
And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skin, clothed them. Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to work the ground, from which he has taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim not too sure. A flaming sword, and it turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life.
Yeah, you were right. I'm a cherub or a cherubim. Some people will say.
Cherubim?
Yeah,
Say again?
cherubim or a cherub.
Okay.
Just another form of a angel.
Okay.
All right. So,
I say that's for that one.
say it one time.
So that's it for that one, right?
Yeah. So
okay. Trying to make sure
we're-
my is on the same page.
yeah. So we're just on chapter 3 for today. And so anybody could. The floor is open. If there's anything that speaks out to you when you read it today that you haven't seen before, or if you know the story like I do, like the back of your hand, what are some elements that stick out to you from this whole man sinning story?
Well, I would just say for me, what stuck out to me firstly was just how the snake or the serpent was kind of like the way he was talking, kind of like in a manner that was, they weren't. Well, let me go to a direct quote, but trying to say like, verse 4, you surely will not die. The servant said to the woman, for God knows when you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And so I think like the serpents, knowing what God said and trying to deceive the woman, which he ended up doing, but the way he went about it to do it, I feel like it was it wasn't like a straight up way, like just showing who what evil is at the very beginning of the fall of man, and then that stuck out to me the way he was talking, and then how like when God came back into the garden, and then they were hiding, and the first thing Adam said was, the woman you put here with me, like she gave me some fruit, like trying to put it on, not put God on as the blame, but like, like just pointing the finger, so I just kind of thought that was a little interesting too. But yeah, so that's what I just right off the bat stuck out to me.
That is beautiful, actually, because you actually hit a couple of the points that I'm going to hit during the presentation. So that's great. It's actually on the mark, like I said. And does anybody else got anything they want to add?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. Well, without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So this is what, the third, let me see, creation, books, creation, this is the fourth Bible study. There we go. I have to remind myself. But we finally made it to the fall. The fall of mankind, however you want to say it. But a lot of elements happen in this story that, again, are key and fundamental when, excuse me, just added one more person. But yeah, they're key and fundamental when it comes to learning how the rest of the Bible kind of set up based off of the fall of man. We have to understand exactly what has happened and why, for example, why it's called the fall of mankind and not the fall of womankind, why it's not just the fall of woman and her seeds, but it's the fall of all of mankind. and why Adam actually gets faulted with sin as opposed to Eve getting faulted with the sin alone. There's a lot of key factors in here with I hope as we get through some of our studies, you'll start to see how the symbolism starts to kind of show up between different families, different stories, going all the way down to Jesus. You'll see how it kind of replays based off of how Adam and Eve conducted themselves in this garden. So without further ado, we'll go to the first part of everything, being the serpent. Being, as it says, the serpent was more than just a snake. So if you're taking notes, I have a lot on these slides, and you can just kind of keep them together. But the word serpent in this context does not refer to a snake, but rather a dragon, which is why it's such a big thing for a dragon of a stature. If you think of Asian culture, the dragon is not the dragon is not just a regular animal or beast. It is something that takes more of a majestic type of, holier animal. So the fact that even in Asian culture that the dragon is something that they celebrate, the word that they use for serpent or serpentine in the Hebrew Bible gives more connotation to something that's a little more livelier, something that's more, majestic. But which is why when it gets cursed to crawl on the ground, one thing that's noted, there was no snake before this happened. We had serpent-like animals, which is where you get your iguanas and your lizards and things like that, but there was no snake before the serpent. But the word serpent, like I said, refers to a dragon. Snakes are reptiles and not beasts of the fields. That is actually a big thing. And if anybody knew Hebrew in here, there's a distinct difference in between all of them. A lot of people look at the snake or the symbolism of a snake and refer them to as Satan. Represents temptation, deception, and sin. But the word Satan in Hebrew is actually the Satan or El Satan. All right. And it just means adversary or one who opposes. All right. You can use them interchangeably or use them two different ways, as an evil entity or as a God-sent opposer. Which is why some people may not understand saying Satan is completely different than the Satan. The Satan is actually the big Satan, while saying Satan or El Satan is just, kind of like another spirit. And you will see on my slides, we have other verses on there. They're just other points that you can kind of go and see where it connects in the Bible. But the great dragon was casted out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceived the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And that's in Revelations 12:9. This is where you kind of get like a retelling of the story, but in the form of the devil and Satan. They don't say the Satan, but you get an entity that actually has them together. The serpent in the garden is not the Satan that everybody thinks. This Satan actually has a name and is actually known as the demon or angel Gadriel. Even though it's stated that it's not a fact, however, in Hebrew culture, before we get to the modern day world, Industrial Revolution and forward, it was actually taught and understood that this lesser demon who actually did the tempting was not Satan himself or Lucifer, but one of his other angels underneath him. And the one that was given the job to guard the garden after Lucifer fell from heaven was Gadriel or Graduel. And since he didn't do his job properly, instead he went into the garden. And once he let the sin get to him, he also tempted everybody else, and boom, now we have Eve falling. And also, if you need to write down any notes or anything like that, just let me know. You can drop it down or pop up on my screen. Or you can just, unmute and say, hey, let me hold on, slow down so I can get this down. So not a big thing. The word demon, for example, is one of the biggest things that we get when we talk about the devil. We always talk about him and his demons. However, the word demons doesn't actually become a negative word until we get to English. And I'm talking about English in the 16th century type English, coming from England, coming to the Americas. The term demon is actually derived from a Greek word called daemon, which just means supernatural being or spirit. Socrates, for example, spoke of his daemon as a spirit that inspired him to seek and speak the truth. The actual word itself does not have any connotation, whether from good or evil. It was just a word that just meant spirit. But like I said, nowadays, demon has a negative connotation. Give me 1 second. Is this actually showing up? Can you guys actually see this on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, it was saying my connection was weak. Just wanted to make sure. But yeah, so it's not until a lot later, like I said, after the English come into the New World, that we get the negative connotation of what a demon is. All right, I'll be moving on to the next. Okay, Satan's accusations. In the Garden of Eden, Satan accuses God of withholding the truth or withholding the knowledge of good and evil, suggesting that God is not fair. Okay, so it goes first thing. The second accusation raises a thought-provoking question. Is it just for God to withhold knowledge from his creation? Or is it just for God to withhold knowledge from his creation? The more significant question is whether can we trust God's character and his intentions of hiding that away from us or telling us not to go to it? Do we believe that his best interests are at heart even when we don't understand his ways? And it goes further to say Satan's implications also reveal his own character as a deceiver who twists the truth to make God appear unjust and himself appear as a liberator. So this is for anybody to answer. Do you think it was just for God to tell his creation that he just made to stay away from one thing, but you could have everything else in the garden?
I would say yes. It's just from a standpoint of just growing up in your own everyday life. Growing up, your parents told you to not do a lot of things, growing up. And it's not because they didn't, necessarily want you doing them. I would say they might have known a little bit more than you know. And I guess looking at it, we can't understand what he understands. So looking at the bigger picture, that's kind of how I look at it.
Okay.
I can agree. I think it was fair because I think it wouldn't be just if he forcibly kept us from being able to touch one thing that's forbidden. But he said don't do it, but he didn't prevent us from it. He still gave us the choice of whether or not we wanted to obey or disobey him.
And Chris, you just said the key word right there. Stefan, you can talk right after. I didn't mean to cut anybody off, but I think Chris, you just said that a key point. He didn't actually prevent us. It still was a choice. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this story. A lot of people believe when somebody tells you not to go do anything, they think that you're being prevented, which is the reason why the whole lust to do something or to do something that you're told not to becomes more appealing because you feel like you're being prevented, like you're chained behind something or you're locked up. I'm breaking out. I'm going free. I'm gonna do exactly what they told me not to do. And in reality, a lot of it is not us being prevented at all. It's just more for our safety, more for protection, more for longevity, and just for us, for our better health. And say no. Like a parent tells you, don't touch the fire. You can turn on the stove all day long and you can burn yourself, but it was more of a way of telling you not to do it so you don't get hurt. But Stefan, you can go ahead.
I was just saying I agree with what Jamar and Chris were both saying. And like I like the analogy, like growing up as a kid, parent telling you not to do things, and just because they know, like they've lived more and they're more have more wisdom and they're older. So yeah, I think that it's I agree with both their answers.
Good. So my next question, do we end up trusting, reading the story of Adam and Eve and seeing that God told them not to, knowing that in the future it was still going to happen? Do we trust what God was doing or in his intentions, or do you feel like it was just let him go ahead and fall and then just put him out? Like, do you feel the way that he kind of orchestrated everything was worth it?
I want to say yes, because at the end of the day, in hindsight, you don't see that you have yolk on your face, but it was just really a prevention to stop what was inevitable. And when you look back at it, like you were saying, I think it'd be more unjust for us not to be able to, fall than than for us to actually be, to actually fall. To not even be given the chance to learn what's right from wrong. I think that'd have been more unjust than, the way it actually played out.
Nice. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, just like add to that, I agree too, and like trying to read the question. I think like God knew what was gonna happen. Like with fall of man, and then it just depends. I don't know. It's just like how much do you think like was in his plan all along for the fall to happen, and then because he knows everything, he's all knowing God. And so for the fall to happen, and then um for him to have his son Jesus to come, and how that story happens, and for him to be the Messiah, was that all planned since the fall? So I don't. It's a like interesting thing that I haven't really thought about, like the fall in this way, and like in-depth questions about like these are really good questions about just the story of the fall, because I haven't thought in this much in depth into the story. So, but yeah, so that's what I wanted to add.
Good. The way that these questions came up, like I said, is again, you just said it. Most people don't think too deeply into the creation story. They just know 7 days it took. God made Earth, and that was it. God made Adam and Eve, boom, and then they ate the fruit from the tree, and then that was it. We learn in Sunday school, and nobody ever looks any further. But we start to see as we go back, which is the reason why we have Bible study. We start to realize that the stories that we have written for us actually have a wealth of knowledge into it. And we realize that with the Bible being the first history book, people who don't know their own history are doomed to repeat it. And you start to see that with every story in almost every single book of the Bible, mankind repeats the same exact mistakes that are based off of eating the fruit in the garden. My next question is kind of a double header. Do you guys believe that God actually has our best interest at heart? Now, granted, I know we can say it's God. Of course, He has our best interest. But with knowing that Satan was in the garden and that we could have been deceived the whole entire time, is it really our best interest, or is it more like a, well, put all these elements in here and I'm gonna just let them figure it out? Since we don't understand necessarily how he thinks. What do you think?
I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, God, Jesus, they're both the one son of, like, so I think that God, I would say he does have our best interest at his heart, because we don't understand God, and like he has known us since we were in our mother's womb, since he knit us in the mother's womb, and how our life's already planned out, and he knows. So like that's the thing that gets me, like, with God, because he knows all the mistakes you're gonna make, the mistakes you're not gonna make, and the result of that, of your mistakes, or whatever the case is. Like he's your whole life's already planned out, and he knows when you're gonna turn left, when you're gonna turn right. So like to know that, to say does he have your interest? Does he have his best interest, our best interest at his heart? I think so, but it's just, I mean, I do think, yeah, I do, but it's a just because he's an all-knowing guy, he knows everything. I feel it's a hard, because like I don't know, I feel like if it's hard to explain, like with what I'm trying to say.
It definitely is a difficult question to answer, and that's the reason why I put it there. Piggybacking off the last study from the creation story, with the knowing how time is really just a man-made thing. However, God is not confined to time. It kind of puts us in this weird place where if God knows what's going to happen, it shows that there's an infinite amount of ways that we can deal with something. If you could go back in time and not make that same mistake or change one of your decisions, where would you be today? God knows exactly how every decision would have played out. So when it's written in Hebrew that he has our best interest at heart, it's more of an understanding saying, hey, listen, it doesn't matter what you pick. I can see exactly where it'll land you at the end of the day, but I'm still putting everything that you need in front of you that will help you make the best decision and the best choice for yourself today. But I always got your best interest at heart, because you're still going to make it no matter how many different infinite possibilities that can come out of this. My goal is always for you to always be the best version of yourself. I guess my best example for that is kind of saying you can go home taking the scenic route, or you can take the back roads. At the end of the day, you're still going to end up home. But you just make that choice in the morning. Which way are you going to take? And depending on the situation, you can choose any type of which way to go. But the way God looks at us, it's the same thing. We can pick which road to go on, but the ultimate goal is always the end, where he wants us to end up at the end of the day. But it still gives us that free will, and it shows just how much he actually does care about us. Moving on. Okay. So I'll ask this question before we go back to that slide. How many people believe that the devil lied to Eve?
Oh, I would say he maybe portrayed it in a way that was a little bit more embellishing than what it really was.
Fair. Anybody else?
I think he just cast a doubt in her mind.
Okay. One more person.
I feel like it's a combination of the two of what they just said. I mean, he really didn't tell a lie, but it wasn't what she thought it was.
Okay. Sam, I know you unmuted, so I felt like you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say he essentially just manipulated her. He didn't lie to her. He just used his truth and just put it in a way where, like the other people said, like caused her to doubt in her trust in God. So that was it.
Okay. All of you guys are actually right. That's exactly what he did. And I'm explaining exactly how he did that. Okay. So the truth is the serpent deceived Eve, but not lied to Eve. One of the things that used to get me when I was younger, especially with this story, I love Genesis. That's probably my favorite book in the Bible. But one of the things that always used to get me when I would listen to pastors in Sunday schools, it was always told that, the devil lied to Eve. But my question was, if the devil knows God, it knows exactly who he is and knows the word better than us, why would he need to lie? Because if he lied, he would have just been put out as a liar. We know he is a liar, but that's just a matter of speaking. The devil never actually lies to people. The devil never actually lied about anything, because if he was lying, he would have been wrong. And the only reason why he ever has any pull with us is because he actually is the great deceiver. And that's what the Bible calls him, the great deceiver, not the great liar. And that never really gelled with me until, especially studying the story, it started to hit me a little bit harder. Like, he was never actually lying to Eve. All he was doing was actually manipulating, lying, crafting that doubt in her mind. And if we look at the definition of deceived, is of a person causes someone to believe something that is not true, typically in order to gain some personal advantage or some leverage, or using known knowledge to mislead a person to cause internal conflict within the thought process, which is exactly what he does in a lot of our lives. And a lot of people think, oh, the devil lies and he's nothing but a liar. No, he's a deceiver, a manipulator. Most of the rest of the stuff that happens is with us. He just puts that one little thing, whispers it into your ear. Everybody else follows and falls for everything else. And Eve was not, immune to that. One of the things that people don't see with Eve's deception is the serpent used the knowledge that she had. And if we go back to what she said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the fruit that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. This goes back to our question. She was deceiving and thinking that God was holding something away from her. With that verse, it already told us exactly how she was thinking, plain and simple. Now, we just talked about these examples. We just added one more person. We just talked about these examples in the other slide of, how parents can tell you not to do something or not to do this or that. And because of the temptation or because we're thinking, they're trying to keep us away from it, that lust, you go ahead and do it anyways. One of the issues with this was the fact that Eve was not properly taught. She didn't have the knowledge that she needed, and you see that in this verse. We may eat from the fruits of the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the fruit that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. And never once Do we actually hear God ever say that to anybody? Well, before we get to that part, what we start to realize is whoever was supposed to give Eve these commands or teach her the rules of the garden probably didn't do a good job. So we take it back and we look through the verses and we realize in there, God never talked to Eve directly and told her, like he told to Adam, what to do and what not to do in the garden. So when we see it, we realize that the person who must have told her what she was supposed to do had to be from Adam. That's the only person else who could talk to her. And if this is how she's perceiving it or able to say it, that means he didn't tell her word for word. He gave her a summary. He was told one thing by God, and he told her, pretty much this is what you have to look at, this is what you have to do, boom, 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 and that was it. And so now, with that lack of not having God's word 100%, the devil was able to take that same word because he knew exactly what God said. And he took it and used it against her by saying, is that what he really said? And that's exactly what he asked her. Is that what he truly said? And when she answers that to herself, she really has no response. It's just like, well, he never really said it like that, but I guess that's what he said. Now, all of a sudden, that manipulation is already working by itself. Now, moving from this deception, we go to the commands. All right. When God made Adam and Eve, he gave them a couple commands to respect when they're in the garden. 1, be fruitful. 2, multiply. 3, replenish the earth. 4, conquer, subdue, and take dominion over the earth. And the 5th one of all, do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. 5 commands that were supposed to be, or five of the original commands that were supposed to be followed, and they would have been perfectly fine in the garden. The first one, being fruitful. When we look at it in Hebrew, they're not as plain as we wrote them down, but in Hebrew, what the whole be fruitful means is also kind of devoting into a personal relationship. It's to pursue personal growth, pursue growth in every aspect of your life and within you. Be intentional about your spiritual development. This is not a command to procreate or repopulate the earth as most people preach it, but it's more of whatever you get, make it fruitful. If I'm talking to you, my conversation should bear some fruit. If I'm dealing with you, that situation should deal some fruit that actually shows our labor. We learned something together, or we created something together. We moved to a new elevation in our lives together. So boom, this is the fruit of that. It's not just about repopulating the earth, but again, with translations, that gets lost. There's a passage in the New Testament where Jesus walks up to a fig tree and he's looking for fruit. There was an expectation that this tree should be replenishing after its own, replicating after its own kind, should be producing figs, and it was not. Jesus proceeds to curse the tree because it was not bearing any fruit. Like the fig tree, we are to be bearing fruit whenever we deal with anybody. We are to be producing results. Those are our friendships, relationships, whether it's with our parents, our siblings, friends, coworkers, our boss, for the ones in this group that are teachers, with your students. Everything needs to bear that fruit. All fruit carries its own DNA. It carries a seed to grow on the vine, and it will expand and enlarge as it develops and grows to full maturity. This is how we're supposed to look at the command to be fruitful. When that seed is planted, no matter where it falls, it should be able to grow. This seed should be strong enough and protected enough and have a hard enough shell that no matter where you plant it, it should still be able to sprout into a beautiful tree. And that's the first command. Second, being multiply. When we see the command for multiplication, it's important for us to understand that, for example, for the guys in the group, we carry the seed, okay? It's not for us. Multiplication is part of your design as a man to multiply the things that you touch, which is why with Adam's curse being cursed is the ground, for your toil to make your bread to eat, pretty much for you to eat for the rest of your life, you have to work. This is the essence of multiplying. You have it in you to put everything out there and for it to come back more. You talk to somebody, it shouldn't just be a conversation that, I told them something and they went with it. It should be, I got something out of it, they got something out of it, and now whoever they go talk to, they're going to get something out of it. That's the whole point of that whole multiplying aspect of that command. Let's just look in the mirror for a moment and think about, where are you right now? Am I doing everything that I'm called to do and everything I can do as a steward where I'm placed? Again, think about your job. Are you doing all the things in your job that are required of you? And not just, I only come here and this is all I get paid for. This is all I'm going to do. Do you go above and beyond so that way other people can see your example and you can be able to shine out that, boom, I was able to do this. Now I learned something new. I understand the inner workings. I can open up my own business. I can be able to enrich somebody else's life because now I've learned how to kind of hold all of this together. Like I said, this is the essence of multiplying. And if you're taking notes, I'll slow it down just so you can kind of write down or take a picture. So first command being fruitful. Number 2, multiplying. The purpose of that is to be connected to someone else. It's connected to a purpose that God has for you. So multiplying right now where you are planted in this season of your life is the most important thing that you can do. Number 3, replenishing the earth. To replenish, we find some Bible translation phrases this as a commandment to fill. The Hebrew word carries the meaning to ordain or consecrate for service to God. Being a Haitian child, we hear it a lot, especially when we go to church. We have a special service where we take the baby and we ordain them or consecrate them to God, in a sense, give them back to God. And when it says to replenish the earth, this following the commands of being fruitful, multiplying, and now replenishing, this gift that you just got from the seed, your child, you're bringing it back, whatever, even if it's not a child, if it's your work, your paper, your assignment, whatever it may be that you've made or created, when you have it and you consecrate it back and you're giving it back, that is replenishing. You're restarting the whole cycle again. I did this not for myself, but for everybody else to benefit from. It should be a reminder to pursue personal growth, and in every area of your life, be intentional about your spiritual development. Being fruitful, multiplying. Once you have that fruit from multiplying, it's not for you, but you replenish and give it out. This is what creates the abundance. This is what creates more so other people can now pick up some of that seed and replant it in other places that you can't reach. And in turn, it replenishes everywhere. Number 4, conquer, subdue, and take dominion over the earth. Now, the 4th command was to subdue the earth. The word subdue can be translated as dominion. If we go back to the 3rd Bible study, we talked about the aspect of hummus and manna being the 2 things that make a human being. Humus being the dirt body and manna being the spirit. When you put those 2 things, only those who have both of those can actually have dominion, let alone have power on earth, which is why the devil can't do anything without a host. Consequently, God can't do anything without a host on earth. That is exactly how he set it up for us to be protected away from any spirit, but for you also to be able to call upon him for help and actually have power on earth no matter what you do. So with him telling us to conquer, subdue, and take dominion over the earth, that is your God-given duty. The Lord commanded Adam and subsequently all of his children to take over and take dominion over the earth, not to let any other forces or principalities actually roam free. And the fifth one being not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is pretty much exactly what it said. What God said was fully intended to protect mankind. It was a complete command and a complete phrase. I'm going to stop right there for a second. A lot of people don't realize when they say know your word, there's protection in knowing your word. Some people think, well, I got my phone, I have my Bible, it is what it is. If I need a word, I can go read it. There's more. You don't have to be a pastor or a priest to know your word. The fact of knowing your word and knowing exactly what it says word for word, for those who actually have older Bibles, you might see the words of Jesus and they're highlighted in red. The point of knowing these certain words and phrases that come from God, they have power. Saying them when you're going through a storm in your life gives you dominion and gives you protection no matter what's going on. What we're shown here in the Bible and in the story is the fact that Eve does not know the phrase or the command that God gave her. It leaves space and cracks for the adversary to use it against you. If you know the full phrase, the full verse, the full story, not just by words, but the concept that is behind it, you're able to now better gear yourself. You have literally what they call the full armor of God. You get to actually be able to protect yourself. So when the devil's saying you're not worth it, you have something to combat that. When they say you're not strong enough, you have something to combat that. When it says you're not going to make it, you have something to combat that. And right here is where we see and understand the importance of Eve not knowing it, let alone having that knowledge, and it put her at a disadvantage. As I continue, if recited correctly, no one can fall. We do not have in the text anywhere where it says God told Eve, like I was saying before, that command. So literally it had to come from Adam. And we can say Adam didn't really do a good job. In the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible at least, the way that is written, Eve was always next to Adam. They were never alone. Think about it. If you were created just now, let's take example, going into class for the first time during a semester. When you have your friends, somebody that you know, you go sit next to them. You usually don't go anywhere else. You usually sit next to somebody that you know, that way you kind of feel a little more comfortable, especially in a new environment. It was no different for Eve. The only person she knew was Adam because that's the only person who was there with her. The only two humans. Where else are you going to go? So for Adam to actually still be there with her the whole entire time, and you've never once really tried to teach her properly, shows the laziness of Adam. And we'll come back to this laziness part in a little bit. If we take this and actually apply it to work, if you're in a position of leadership, when you don't prep or let alone teach everything that you need to your group, you put everybody in a hole to fall. Trouble can start. Some people can end up messing up. The whole thing could fall apart just because you didn't do your job of just telling a phrase or the rules or going over everything that you knew or what they should know from start to finish. Some people say when I go to a new job, they try to read all those forms to me. It's boring, it's annoying. There's a reason for it. Because if you know everything that's required of you, your chances of falling or failing are limited. Because now if it happens, it's either you chose to go against those rules or you didn't know due to the lack of somebody not telling it to you. They're trying to absolve themselves of ever being at fault. Same thing should have been here, but Adam did not do that. So as it says, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Verse 17, not what Eve said. Two different things. It says, if you eat of it, you shall surely die. Not if you touch it, you might die. Or if I go near it, I will die. Or if I look at it, I will die. Everything else that Eve could have said would not make sense. And the devil would know that because he knows exactly what God said. If he was in the garden, he definitely heard it from Adam, because Adam's job was to also teach everybody after he named everybody. He was to give them the rules that God gave to him. So before we continue, I'm going to go ahead and point this out. We have two people, and we consider Eve the perpetrator of sin in mankind. But in reality, the truth is we have Adam sins 3 times while Eve sins her first time. So when we look at it, Adam is the perpetrator of sin, which is why it's the sin of mankind after Adam. And he's the one that gets credited for the sin and not Eve. Even though the Bibles will try to still depict Eve as being the person, go to any Hebrew, Ethiopian, or Eastern Orthodox church or Bible, and you will see it plain as day that's translated from Hebrew. It reads that Adam's willful transgression is the reason why mankind fell into sin.
Wait, what was Adam's 3 sins? He said he sinned 3 times and Eve sinned once.
So, and I'm gonna explain them in a second, but I'll just go ahead and say them. So first things first, like I said, Adam was there with Eve the whole entire time. Okay. So one of the jobs of somebody who's with their partner or their wife is, as a man, our job is to protect them. He failed at protecting her. Okay. So while the devil is talking to Eve, he did not once try to stand up and talk or protect her from the devil, like leave her alone. You know what? Hey, God, she's wrong. God didn't say that, but I know exactly what God said. Leave her alone. Nothing. He didn't defend her. So that's the first part. Second, he didn't teach her properly what the phrase was for her to be able to defend herself, whether he was there or not. So because of his lack of doing his job, it's kind of like if your boss knows that you're doing something wrong that can cost the company millions, and he's just standing there just letting you do it because he can care less. You would never hear that happening. You see what I'm saying? So with Adam not protecting Eve, that's one. His job was to take care of the garden and everything in it. So he failed by protecting Eve. She was in the garden. 2, he didn't teach her properly. So that's the second one. Third one, he let her lead him into sin. So when Eve is eating the fruit and actually committing her first sin, he's committing his third one. So in every Hebrew Bible, it's like I said, it's always Adam's willful transgression. Why it's willful is because a part of him always wanted to do it, but he needed an excuse to do it. So at him actually leaving the door open, she could do it and let me know how it is. And if she did it and nothing happens to her, I'll go ahead and do it after her. So that's how you get to the blame game later on with when God asks what happens, everybody pointing the finger at somebody else. And this is what sin will do to you. Sometimes you may not be the one to do it, but you'll tell somebody, hey, you go try it. And if that works for you, then I'll go ahead and do it. I think all of us can say or vouch that we've seen this in school plenty of times. You don't want to get in trouble for something, so you tell somebody else to go do it. And then you kind of see what the reaction is. If they get through with no problem, then you'll do it too. But in the truth of the reality, you wanted to do it from the beginning. Oh, hey, go take that off the teacher's desk. Or hey, you go do that. Or hey, you go mess with so and so. I just want to see what's going to happen. And if nothing happens to you, I'm gonna do it next. Literally exactly what Adam did. So to answer your question, those are the 3-to-1 sin that Adam did versus Eve, which is why it's the fall of mankind and not the fall of womankind. So, like I said, God created Adam and Eve in his perfect image. If you remember back to our other study, image being characteristics, but they were both physically beautiful and graceful. They possessed unmatched intelligence and spiritual depth. The bodies that we have today are nothing compared to Adam and Eve's. And if you want more proof of that, look at the ancient Olympians and the Greek people. The ways their bodies were compared to our bodies today, two different things. When the Olympics started back in the day, these people's bodies and muscle tendons, their muscle fibers were completely, you would say they're on steroids. But for them, that was natural. A person being fit back then versus us being fit, we're struggling to stay in shape. One thing that we eat can throw us off. Back then, food was healthy. Their bodies were immaculate because there was no laziness. You had to get up. You had to farm. You had to walk. Everybody's body was up to par in a sense of matter speaking. So the fact that we look at two different bodies, and that's still after sin comes in. Adam and Eve's bodies was literally the perfect embodiment of what a man's body and what a woman's body would ever hope to achieve. Their minds, the intelligence that they had, and the spiritual depth, the connection to the spiritual realm that they had, we can only imagine to even get a fraction of that nowadays because of how much sin has broken down our bodies. Our lifespans are not as long. What we can actually understand is not as much. Spiritually, we have to go through so much just to connect, and one little thing throws us off. We have people claiming and crying out depression every single day, when in reality, it's a consequence of their own actions and their own choices. Completely two different things. But again, spiritually, they were fashioned a little lower than the angels. Okay? And this is why the devil was so mad at God for making us, because why make people who are lower than the angels who didn't have free will, but you're giving it to them? He gave them so many things, and the only responsibilities that Adam had to do was follow the rules. If he broke it, boom, that was sin. Sin was always present. As long as free will is there, sin is always present. When Eve offered Adam the fruit, in his mind, he just said, hey, look, this is my chance to get a taste of this, because if something happens, I can just blame her. Already, his mind was already making little caveats to, I'm not going to be the one blamed for this. I'm going to blame her instead. And from this point, this is the reason why he willfully let himself eat the fruit. Now, the reason why I said the third one being the third sin of Adam, let's look at it this way. If your parents, and you're the oldest child, says, hey, I'm going out, watch over the house, make sure your siblings don't mess anything up, don't break anything, boom, 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 here are the rules. If your parents go out and your younger siblings break the vases, break the plates, make a mess, who's in trouble? Usually the older kid that had the responsibility given to them. It's the same exact example here when God tells Adam what the rules are. And Eve is supposed to follow because that's somebody after Adam. And the way we know that Eve is after Adam is because Adam named her. Same way a parent would name a child, Adam named every animal in the garden. None of them ate from that tree. He named Eve. Why are you the only one that ate? When that parent comes back home, who's going to get in trouble? The younger siblings or the older sibling for not telling them not to do it? And I'll take it a step further. If the older sibling also took part in the destruction of the home or breaking the vase or doing whatever else that they were not supposed to do, is it enough to tell the parents, well, I only did it because so-and-so did it first? Usually the response you're going to get back from your parents, aren't you the older one? Why are you letting the younger one influence you? Aren't you the older one? Why are you listening to the younger one? Aren't you the leader? And you, like I said, you can apply these stuff to everything in your lives. How many times can you be in a situation and something goes wrong and they come to you and you get blamed for it because you're the leader? If it fails underneath you, you are still sided with the destruction because it's your responsibility. He says, so Adam is sided with the fall of man and not Eve because Adam failed in his job as a leader because he was made first, a man and a husband. And you can find those between verses 4 and 6. Moving on. When we get to verse 9, and God calls to the man, where are you? The tone here in Hebrew, it's written in the context of someone who's actually heartbroken. A lot of people will say, you know, God just calling out for them, just, where are you? Where are you? No. When he's calling out, because he already realized what they've done. That's why he shows up and just like, come on, you guys. I expected so much more from you guys. And it shows that the connection between the two is now cut. It's like an actual physical cutting of a relationship. God already felt it, like, ow, you guys were like this to me, you know, fingers crossed, you guys are so close to me, and now all of a sudden we're like two separate fingers. And he could feel that. So when he asked, where are you? It was more of a, it's not that I can't see you in the garden or you can actually hide from me. It's that bond that we have. I realize it's not there. It's kind of like when you're with somebody, a friend, and things are not going well, or a relationship and things are not going well. You can kind of feel the hurt. Like, dang, after that argument, we won't really recover from that. After what I said, it's going to be hard for me to get back in that person's good graces. And that's the type of tone that we get here when he says, where are you? All right. In the next verse, we see God change his tone from sad to authoritative. He asked the question now, where are you? And he waited for the response. The subject of this is singular, meaning when he was talking directly to Adam and only Adam. He does not talk to Eve. Now, these are between verses 10 and 13. God then turns to the woman and says, what is this that you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. Okay. Now, this is where we get to the point where everybody is actually blaming somebody else. God asks Adam. God says, Adam says, listen, I know you're upset. However, if you really think about it, it's not my fault. It's the woman that you put here. She made me do it. You ask the woman, she goes, it's not really my fault. It's the serpent who made me do it. Then we go back to Adam and he doubles down and he says, God, in reality, if you think about it, it's not really just the woman, but if you think about it, you got to take responsibility for it too, because you made her. Now we start to see just how rude Adam actually can get in the text. So when Adam is talking to God in this text, his tone turns from sorry or sorrow to now rude in saying that it's not my fault. You did it because you made Eve, so therefore you should take responsibility for it. Now, again, we've never been told that in Sunday school. We've never been told that at church. But yeah, Adam is getting rude and a little frank with God right here in the garden. And like I said, these are between verses 10 and 13. The consequences of the blame game are severe. By refusing to take responsibilities for our own actions, we perpetrate a cycle of dysfunction and mistrust. We also miss out on the opportunity for growth and self-improvement. Instead of blaming others, we should focus on identifying our own mistakes and working to correct them. And literally, as it says, blaming somebody else always takes away from the fact that we can grow from something if we made a mistake. If we messed up, we messed up. Take accountability and keep it moving. We live in a generation where a lot of people fail, let alone don't even understand the concept of taking accountability or responsibility for their actions. Something happens, it's somebody else's fault. Something happens, hey, well, I didn't have this in my life growing up, or nobody ever taught me this growing up. But you have common sense. You knew that was going to hurt somebody. You know, it's always a blame on somebody else, so that way nobody's in trouble. And again, this starts right here in the garden. This is the epitome of sin. Sin will always cause you to want to blame or put the blame on somebody else and never yourself. God's love. Adam and Eve were now in bondage to sin, and death a consequence of their own decision. But even in this moment of despair, God's love for them remained unchanged. God took them and made garments to cover their nakedness. Because when he asked them and they said, you know, we are naked. God said, you guys been naked since day one. I don't know what changed now. But because now everything else that was unlocked with eating that fruit opens up the door for now mankind to actually have the opportunity to know the depths and the magnitude of their sin. When you do something and you know it hurts the other person, you can feel it, like, dang, I messed up. Doesn't mean that you're going to own up to it, but you know exactly what's going on. And that's the reason why in Hebrew, even though he's making them physical garments to cover them, it's also written backwards, where it said, you know, he's also protecting them from their own self. Their minds are being transformed now from the intelligent people that they were. There is a shield, another clothing, another garment that is now blocking them from now wanting to take that responsibility. If they can break through that, accountability is now taken care of. But that is the reason why a lot of people struggle with that. This is where that happens. And a little side note, a lot of things in Genesis that were written in Hebrew actually have double meanings. You have the metaphor and you actually have the physical thing that is actually happening. Even with the fruit, some people believe it's an actual fruit that they bit into and actually ate. Whereas on the other side, if you look at the metaphor, it's actually written as Adam and Eve having sex. And I know that would be a little confusing for some. They're husband and wife. Why not? You got to involve the serpent. But without getting too much into that, it's just knowing in Hebrew, there's always two parallels, the metaphor and the physical side of it. So where God should have struck them down for messing up and starting over with his creation, he didn't. Having that free will, it allows you to see the errors of your way, and you can now choose to make the right choice in the future. So God chose to forgive them and let them live with the stain of sin on their lives, because now in the future, when it comes to certain things, not only can they teach it to the next person to not mess up, they understand just how bad it is to now make these mistakes. It teaches them what we call a lesson. And this is in verses 14 to 20. And we have a breakdown of what we call the first curse and the two penalties. and the promise to fix the original sin. So, first curse and 2 penalties. We have, most churches will tell you that, they were all cursed. But in fact, only the serpent was cursed. And we still see that curse even in Revelations, with him being cursed to walk on his belly and eat dust for the rest of his life. But because of God's love for Adam and Eve, he gave them penalties and not curses. And if we understand curses in Hebrew, if they were cursed, they would have been dead right then and there. They would have been in punishment or in bondage and never been able to move on with their lives and atone for their sins. But having penalties gives them a chance to become better. God graciously sought them, confronted them, and offered the promise of deliverance through the seed of the woman, who will crush the head of the serpent. And it was gracious because Adam and Eve deserved judgment, not a promise of deliverance. We need to understand that the penalties imposed on Adam and Eve affected not just them, but every person in history after them, including me and you. All sin is exactly like that. You never truly sin in isolation. You might think that you're doing something behind closed doors, but it affects everybody around you, whether you know it or not. The person who's addicted to something behind closed doors doesn't affect just you. It affects your family, your kids, future generations, because now it causes you to miss out on events, miss out on, appointments, miss out on meeting with other people, miss out on yourself being the best version of yourself. Everything has their own consequences with it. Sin always affects others, not only in this generation, but also in all the generations to come. In Genesis 1:28, the couple was commanded to be fruitful and multiply and to subdue the earth. That commandment involved work, but not with toil and pain. But the penalty now that God introduced is toil and pain as a necessary price to fulfill that first commandment that he gave to Adam. And also to note the way that God addresses them all, from first talking to Adam, then to Eve, then from the serpent to Eve, then back to Adam. It's in the natural order of how it should go. Serpent's curse, and that's revisiting verse 14. The Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all the beasts of the field. On your belly you shall eat all the days of your life. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. The most important part of this section is the fact that this is the first prophecy in the Bible. And the main one is repeated throughout the Bible. This is the promise of the Messiah. Now, there is a certain phrase in Hebrew where they recite this. They recite the fact that woman was made out of man, and through her seed will come and bring the promised Messiah. Okay? And that's what leads us to Jesus in the future, which is, with being his name Jesus Christ. His name is actually Emmanuel, but the name Jesus Christ actually starts here, with it being the promise of the Messiah. So in Hebrew culture, the word Messiah is actually created to explain the curse from the serpent in verse 14. So if we want to put that to a side note, there you go. Eve's penalty. And I just notice talks to Adam first. What happened? How'd you let this happen? Eve, what did you do? Serpent, why'd you do this? Give him his curse. Comes back up to Eve. Here's your penalty. To the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Now, right here is where we get of course, Chris, you have a question?
Yes, I was curious about the previous verse where it says that I will put enmity between you and the woman. Is that speaking to what you're explaining regarding the Messiah?
Yes. So
Okay.
like I said, most churches will just read that for the plain words and think it's just there's always going to be like an issue between the seeds of Adam and Eve and all their future generations and a snake. You know, you're never going to like a snake. You're always going to crush them. Boom, boom, boom. It's literally in Hebrew. It's literally the way they put it. It's the beginning of the prophecy. And like I said before, it's puzzle pieces. So you have to go through the Bible and kind of put these pieces together, and then it leads to the first book in the New Testament where you get Jesus being born, and it all comes to fruition.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, going to Eve's penalty. So since I just already read it, verse 16, in Hebrew, of course, it also identifies that this childbearing, in pain you shall bring forth children. Of course, we understand childbearing for a woman is quite painful. Some have more pain than others. However, with this whole pain bearing, you also get the opposite of it as well, which is the periods. When they're not having a baby, the period pains. This all happens as a consequence for Eve. Eve's job was to be a incubator for Adam. From there, Adam's seed was to go with Eve's egg, and they would come together, planted in her garden. Boom, same thing. But now that she has already sinned, the consequence for her now is you're going to deal with that in pain. The way the Israelites broke this down in Moses' time was in two parts. Like I said, I just pretty much explained that part. Extreme pain while childbearing. The pain is symbolic and significant because God really wanted to make an example out of Eve, and while doing that, showing that the coming Messiah will have to endure said pain to make up for Eve's mistakes. Okay, when people tell mothers, if you start to read through the Bible as we'll go through more stories, you start seeing whenever a mother is having a baby, says the pain will endure, and you will have the joy in the morning. They always have a phrase that they tell to all the mothers to kind of subdue them and make them understand that it's going to get better. This is also foreshadowing Jesus and him having to endure said pain to make up for Eve's mistake. Two, and this is the second part of the verse, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. Now, a lot of people have a very, very big confusion with this because this is the birth of feminism as well, the second part of this. Her relationship with her husband has now shifted from the helper to her being called to be submissive to him. Okay? Why is it now being called for her to be submissive to her husband? Is because she tried to lead him. Instead of following and going back to the example of if your parent tells you, hey, you're in charge, make sure everything stays in order, and your younger sibling tries to rule and does their own thing, and you get in trouble, you're not going to be happy about that. So if you tell your parents, hey, so-and-so is not listening to me, your parents can go back now and say, hey, listen, he's older than you, she's older than you, you need to follow what they're saying, or else. This is exactly what God is telling Eve, because you wanted to kind of rule instead when you were supposed to be side by side with him and be his helper. You wanted to rule him. So because of that, now your curse is to be submissive to him. Still doesn't mean be a slave to him. Submissive just means, hey, what he says goes. You still have to help him, but no longer in the same role where you guys are side by side. It's more of a he leads, you follow. That's the only difference here. A lot of people will try to show and use this verse as a ode to slavery or the woman doesn't have any rights. No, being submissive is just really respecting and understanding what he's saying to follow and make his vision come true. Simple as that. The second part being the relationship is significant because a helper sits next to you as you work on whatever it may be. However, someone who is in submission must now wait to be told where to sit and help you. Meaning the man must lead, and or she cannot properly do her role as a woman in the relationship with the man. Also shows that because now that she had a taste of going against leadership, she will desire her husband's role as head of the relationship. And I put a note there to look at the relationships today because in reality, we have a lot of broken families. And I think a lot of us can, speak up for that. We have a lot of broken families that women are left to do all the jobs by themselves. We used to have a problem where a lot of kids would say on Mother's or Father's Day, they'll say, my mother is my father. Okay? The fact that women have to do man's job when the man is not there, yes, you're still a mother. However, and I'm not trying to sound sexist at all, I promise, but the role of a woman is to nurture and to raise her young. Meaning you cook for them, you give them a place for them to grow, sleep, and be able to bathe themselves. The man's job is to lead them and teach them. However, if the man is not there, of course, our women are left alone to do what they have to do. But the whole desire part is for the women who want to take that leadership role away from the man. When you see a man who's trying to walk into a relationship with a woman who has kids, and he kind of gets pushed out because, again, kids don't respect him. The woman doesn't respect him. It's you need to either go 50-50 with me, or you need to make more money than me, or it's not you can come in here as long as you're trying to work this relationship and lead, follow. A lot of people do not want to be submissive. And it doesn't just only pertain to relationships between a man and woman. It goes for our work too. We get to our jobs where we don't want to be submissive to our coworkers, but as long as there's a paycheck there, whatever our boss tells us, we're submissive to that because we got a paycheck. But you have your manager, you have somebody else, and you do not want to listen to them. I could care less. I don't care. We disrespect them all day long. It's the same issue here. Your desire will be, how can I say, your desire will be to be above them. I don't want nobody to lead me, but you won't go over your boss's head because you're getting a paycheck. So it's easy for us to do it when we're gaining something out of it, but we don't realize that a lot of this is also because of Eve's penalty. So not to lose anybody here, her penalty being her desire for her husband's spot, she wants to be the man of the relationship. She wants to lead the household. She doesn't want to be after Adam because she got to taste the fruit first. I want to be in the driver's seat, not you. If you'll go to the next page. Oops. Sorry, guys. My computer is... Oh. Okay. There we go. Can everybody see my page?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so verse 17, we got Adam's penalty. And to Adam, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And the way the Israelites broke down Adam's penalties worked like this: 3 parts. Because he listened to his wife, he gave up his role as a leader and the firstborn in the story, thus giving woman a taste for leadership, causing internal conflicts in all relationships for the rest of life. This was a direct disobedience to God because he was in charge and made first. So that's the first part of this penalty. Because of man's ineptitude to actually do their part to lead, we have caused the issue of our relationships even till today. This is one of our biggest problems, especially when we have broken families. The second part being the ground. The ground was cursed because of him, not just the plants, but this symbolized all of life being affected. Paul talks about it in Romans 8:20-21, and he explains how all creation was affected because this means Adam losing his authority, and now the relationship between humans, bug, animals, and all other living things is broken. He wouldn't have to train and work at that relationship to lord over everybody. So even as small as something as mosquitoes biting you in the summer, natural disasters and diseases is a direct result of Adam doing this. And a lot of people think it's just as simple as the ground is cursed because of you. When as soon as he says the ground is cursed because of him, that actually means the earth is cursed because of you. Things are not put out of balance because of you. So where you could have just walked around and no animal attacked you, now every animal is fending for themselves. Mother Nature, all that comes into place because of Adam's curse. So people, we don't think second thoughts about a mosquito biting you. You just think it's a mosquito. That's its natural function. Up until this point, that was never an issue for us. Little things like that, hurricanes, floods, all those diseases, our bodies getting sick, all a direct result of Adam. Without this curse, or my bad, not curse, without this penalty, we wouldn't have these issues to affect us. Now, the third and final part is this death becomes the enemy of man. Everyone is now doomed to deal with physical aging and death due to their sin. The immortality that once was is now regulated to a lifespan and is numbered in years. Okay? We have a certain amount of years now. Our lifespan, we don't really have anybody who lives more than 120 years. We don't really have most people. An average person is really averaging up to 70, if not 80 years in their lives. And I'm talking about for the healthiest of the healthiest people. So all of this becomes a penalty because of Adam, because he diverging into that sin of eating that fruit, you now open the possibility for death to come now towards everybody from you and to every one of your future seeds that come out of you as well. Death is our enemy because God made us to be everlasting, eternal. He made us perfectly, meaning we don't have any issues in our body. Our bodies don't get sick. Our bodies continue to go on. They replenish themselves. Yes, Kia?
Oh, did I unmute?
Oh, I thought you had a question. My bad.
Oh, no. In my headphones in the paper.
Sorry about that. Okay, not a problem. But yeah, so that becomes the penalty. Moving forward, God's provision. In verses 20 and 21, God does something that will become a symbol for the whole Bible, and that is sacrifice of an innocent animal to cover the sinful man. Salvation starts here as Adam realizes where he is wrong and now proceeds to do things the right way and gives Eve her name, life giver, because now she even has children, or before she even had children. 4 things to come out of the view of salvation. Man needs covering for his sin, which is going back to what I was saying about the garments. Okay? Man needs covering. Man trying to cover his own sin will never be adequate. Adam and Eve covering themselves with their fig leaves was never enough. They needed God to intervene to cover them. So only God can provide us with a suitable covering for our sin. Since we invoke death by eating the fruit, an innocent life will always have to be shed to cover our sin. So this is the ultimate price that we paid by the Messiah, so no more bloodshed will need to happen. So again, another part of that puzzle, the lamb being shed, is now what we use as the theme in the Old Testament until we get to Jesus in the New Testament, where he is now pierced on the cross for us. And as we have said, with Jesus being on the cross, he actually gets pierced in the same place that God took from Adam and made Eve from. So from the exact same spot, just to show you exactly how everything still recycles right back to Adam and Eve in this garden. So we have a new start in the last couple verses. Shows how God realized if not taken away from the garden, we were doomed to repeat our mistakes. Think about it. If we looking at every single sin that you ever completed in your life, a lot of it is very repetitive. If you don't get away from that friend or from that thing or from that environment, you're going to continue doing it. In his good love and mercy, he led the man and woman away, blocking them away from paradise because of their sin, but bringing them to a place where they can now flourish in their new environment. Here was Adam and Eve's new start. Next Bible study will be about Cain and Abel. So we'll be reading chapter 4, Genesis chapter 4. So you can read that ahead. We'll read it together when we come back next week. However, like I said, I wanted to emphasize, whenever you do get away from that environment, God always gives you a new start. You always feel fresh when you're finally done. Kind of like, and I hate to say it this way, but like an addict, once they're done and actually kicked the addiction, it's a new start. This is exactly what has happened for Adam and Eve now, a new start. Okay. So, do we have any questions?
I just have one really quick. Just you were saying about when Jesus was on like when he was hung on the cross, crucified, and he was they did give him that stab wounding right where he said that woman was created from, or Eve was created from Adam. Why did you say it, like everything's food? Like what was the significance of the Jesus getting stabbed in the rib, and then like I get what like, well, I guess why did you? How does that all come full circle? I guess like why did they? How did I guess why did that happen that way?
I get what you're saying. So the reason why, again, like I said, everything is doomed to repeat itself, and Jesus coming back, or not coming back, but Jesus coming is to fix the original mistakes. We have in the Bible 3 Adams. Adam is the first Adam. The second Adam is Noah. And the third Adam would be Jesus. Okay? And it's always in threes. But with Jesus replacing Adam and redoing the whole thing of creation, pretty much him getting stabbed in the part, because again, we always read it as Eve is the part of the rib cage of Adam. In reality, that's not true. What's in Hebrew is Eve was made from the bone marrow of Adam, out of his side. It was literally a surgery, his DNA, his actual stem cells. So for Jesus to get pierced in the same location that Adam was pierced at, to have that surgery, he bled out until he was bleeding out water. It's supposed to signify and symbolize all that blood that was made or that was used to create Eve now has been cleansed and now is running clear as water. It's no longer dirty blood. It's as clear as water. And with this now signifies that original sin is now covered for life.
Wow, I had no idea. Uh, that's really deep and meaningful. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. Thank you for answering it.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. Well, like I said, like always, thank you guys for coming today. Next week, same time, I'll see you guys. Chris, I'll ask you to go ahead and pray us out, and then you guys have a great night.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for your wonderful grace, love, and mercy. We ask first and foremost that you would forgive us of our sins, both known and unknown, and that you would continue to give us provision in our life. I pray that we would bind the lessons from this Bible study to our heart and apply this new wisdom and knowledge in the areas that it is needed. I pray that you would bind up any weapon formed against us, and that you would give us a good night's rest so that we can go into tomorrow with a clear mind and a light heart, and pursue the things that you have placed on our spirit, and continue to protect us as we seek to find your will. And I pray all these things in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Unless anybody has anything else to say before we go, floor is open. Okay. Well, you guys have a good night. Oh, Kia, you got something to say?
No.
Okay. Well, if not, then you guys have a good night, and I'll see you guys next week.
Good night, guys.
All right, John.
All right, good night.
Have a great night,
Later.
guys.
Later.